everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talking with Dr. T, conversations on bridging the gap between faith and mental health. I am so excited about tonight's episode. We are coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am very excited about my sister, my guest that I'm going to have. First and foremost, I just want to thank Reverend Dr. Amy Ciceron here at East Stonewall AME Zion Church. I want to thank her. I'm just so grateful for her opening the doors for us to have this conversation, and what an appropriate place to have the conversation where we're talking about bridging the gap between faith and mental health. So I'm very excited about my guest tonight. And so let me just kind of give an overview of who I have here. LaVerne Hanes Collins is a nationally certified counselor who holds professional counselor licensures in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Dr. Collins is highly respected as a keynote speaker, workshop presenter, clinical supervisor, professional coach, trainer, motivator, and minister. Her special interests include multicultural competencies, minority treatment needs and disparities, organizational dynamics, and faith-based competencies in mental health. Now you see why I really wanted to have my guest tonight. Throughout her career, she has established herself as a sought-after diversity trainer and consultant in behavioral health, medicine, education, and business. And just a little bit more about her, she is the author of 2 books, Overlook, Counselor Insight for the Unspoken Issues in Black American Life, and The Fruit of Your Pain, Experiencing Spiritual Renewal Through Seasons of Struggle. With a strong counselor identity and a commitment to training and developing more multicultural trainers in the counseling professions, and I also know her in the helping professions as a whole, Dr. Collins now trains and mentors other counselors and helping professionals who want to increase their impact and income as approved diversity mental health trainers. So without further ado, my friend, my sister, my colleague, Dr. LaVerne Hanes Collins, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. So excited.
Yes, thank you. And so, you know, we're starting a trend now because my other guests are going to say, how come we're not doing our sessions live? But I'm glad that we could be here tonight. Yes.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's good to be in person.
Yes. So I gave our listening audience a little bit more about your bio, but tell us, how did you get here? Tell us a little bit more about your journey of how you got to where you are right now in your career, but also just kind of weaving in that role as a minister and bridging the gap between faith and mental health.
This has been an evolving journey. I did not start out wanting to do any of this.
Yes.
You know, did you know that my first career was in broadcasting?
No, I did not. Okay.
My first career was in broadcasting, and I felt I had the need to make that my major as an undergraduate. So as an undergrad, I majored in a dual major in TV, radio, advertising, and marketing management.
Okay.
I had already been working on air from the age of like 16. On air in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and was in broadcasting, using my marketing and my advertising for a few years, and then it just lost its sizzle. I wasn't in that field very long at all, but I recognize now that the Lord had me get that degree because of what He was going to use me to do later. So what I developed an itch for, before I go there, I felt the call to ministry, to preach before even counseling. And, well, you know, that is quite a burden. It's a blessing, but it's also a weight if you take that seriously. Yes. And at the same time, I found myself surrounded by people who had degrees in psychology and counseling, who were also Christian ministers. And I recognized that to really be effective in helping people, I needed to understand the heart and mind of people and the heart and mind of God.
Yes.
And thus, I continued my studies with a master's in community counseling and my doctorate in Christian counseling to be able to, as I said, the heart and mind of God, to be able to convey to the people that sit before me God's heart toward them and their struggles and their situation. And so many people come with distorted images of the Lord. They come with misunderstandings and false teachings and sometimes just plain confusion or anger at God. And it has proven to be absolutely the God combination that I needed for my career. And because of the advertising and marketing, I do most of my own marketing and advertising for my practice and my business now.
Oh, thank you so much for that overview. And, you know, as I'm thinking about your background with your doctorate in Christian counseling, your background in ministry, let's talk about that for a minute.
Sure.
Why is it important to have the intersection and bridge the gap between faith and mental health?
Well, I believe we are biological, psycho, meaning psychological, biopsycho, social, relational, spiritual beings. And so often in the faith community, we have not made a distinction between mental health and spiritual health. Absolutely, they're connected because we're biopsychosocial spiritual beings. But we've got to understand what is a function of the brain, because the brain is just an organ. Like your heart, your liver, your lungs, the brain is another organ that sometimes needs a little help, needs some adjusting. When the brain undergoes trauma, when our life experiences bring traumatic events and sit them at our doorstep or at the door of our hearts, we've got to recognize what is of the mind, what is of the brain, and what's of the spirit. And be able to both tease that out and bring it back together again. And that's what I love doing.
Yes, I like that. And so, you know, we both have a passion for doing this and bridging the gap between faith and mental health, the intersections, but we also have a passion from a diverse, multicultural perspective. So talk a little bit about why that's important to add in that intersection with faith, mental health, culture, but specifically African-American Black culture.
Well, the Black African-American community, our journey has been unique historically. And as I talk about in the book, we have overlooked historical factors and overlooked identity issues. There has been overlooked clinical bias in mental health when it comes to providing services and treatment to African Americans. We have overlooked losses, and thank God we have overlooked strengths. Thank God we have strengths. Even though the rest of the world may overlook our strengths or invalidate or dismiss our strengths, we have strengths. So in order for us to serve the whole person, we can't serve them monoculturally. When I say monoculturally, we can't treat everyone as if their history, their identity, their background, their struggles have historically or are the same in the present. So our histories, our struggles, our challenges requires, in my opinion, requires that we are sensitive to how we came to be who we are today and how the environment, the culture, the political environment, we're living in a time, how all of this affects people of color, especially African Americans. You can't separate our story from our mental health.
Yes. I appreciate that. And, you know, you talk about we can't separate our story from our mental health. We are biopsychosocial spiritual beings. How do we help the churches with understanding it? Because, yes, we are both ordained, right, and have that background, but we're also professional counselors. So how do we help faith leaders, interfaith leaders, Black faith leaders, understanding the importance of not overlooking the mental health?
Well, let me tell you, what you are doing is a perfect example of utilizing your knowledge and bringing your resources to the church. And I appreciate that. I thank you for doing this. I thank you for doing this. I believe that one thing we can do as counselors, as professionals, is make ourselves available in a non-threatening way. We have to build relationships with our local churches, and not just the church to which we hold membership, but we've got to make ourselves available to the communities on a broader scale. And we've got to begin to invite the faith community into safe spaces for education and understanding and resource distribution and referrals and whatnot. Let's host some mental health awareness days in our churches, in our communities. Let's host Mental Health Community Day in the Black community. Let's host workshops, not just for professionals, and you and I do a lot of that for professionals, but I know you also do a lot of that for the community. So let's host some workshops, and let's ask our pastors to bring speakers in to talk about these questions that sometimes people are just afraid to ask. You know, sometimes I just feel, maybe they might say, I might feel a little anxious. I might feel depressed. I might feel hopeless. Sometimes I don't even feel like my life is worth living. But I can't say that to anybody. I'm not going to share that because they'll think I'm the C word, crazy. And I tell people I do not use that word. I do not use that word. I had a woman call me the other day and said, I've been in the loony bin a few times. And I said, I have no idea what that is. Right. And I said, if you mean you've been hospitalized, that's okay. Yes. That's okay. Everybody goes to the hospital or the doctor for something. Yes. And it is no shame if we can destigmatize. And if we can let people know that the brain is an organ just like your heart. You go to a heart doctor, let's do a mental health check too. You go to an OBGYN if you're a woman. Let's do a mental health check too. Yes. So we have to emphasize those messages. And I think the way to emphasize those messages is by coming together and creating safe spaces to talk and to share. You don't have to share the ins and outs of a mental health struggle, but come and learn and learn about resources. And let's just take the stigma and the shame out of this. We're all humans.
Yes, I agree. And so here it is, we're talking about how do we do that with churches and faith-based leaders, right? Mm-hmm. But let's flip it, because you and I are very passionate about training professional counselors, right?
Yes.
So if we have any counselors, therapists, social workers, marriage and family therapists listening, let's help to explain to them why it's important to bridge the gap between faith and mental health, and especially from a multicultural perspective.
Yeah. Well, I was in graduate school getting my counseling degree a long time ago. And I'll tell you, for the veterans who have been in the field for a while, like me, that we are clinical supervisors now. We are managers and directors of programs. We are in private practice. We are lead clinicians. And I went to an amazing university that was accredited in counseling early. You know the word KCREP. That's the accrediting body. Yes. We were accredited by KCREP in the 1990s. We were one of the first schools. Yes. But guess what? 1 month of learning about multicultural issues. Yes. It was 1 credit of a 3-credit trilogy on multiculturalism, ethics, and legal issues in counseling. If we don't acknowledge that we did not get enough on multicultural issues, and none of that touched on faith issues, none of it, not the legal, not the ethical, and if we did touch upon it, it was stay away from it, don't go there, don't go there. Well, in the Black community, we have always been a very spiritual people. Yes. Whether it's in Christianity or an Islamic faith or any other, we have just, even if you don't say that you believe in God, in the Black church, there's still a spiritual presence, a spiritual something in one's life. So we have to acknowledge the reality that the spirituality is important, and we didn't get anything on that, at least not back in the day, and we got so very little on multiculturalism. How much can you learn about multicultural issues and perspectives in 1 month?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why we do what we do. I provide continuing education, opportunities for counselors, and I train counselors to be national trainers as well. So if we don't, we're doing the people a disservice, because again, how can you minister to someone's heart and mind if you dismiss their history, their culture, and their spirituality?
Absolutely. Amen. And although this is not the time or the place, but I think as professional counselors and social workers, we should have a requirement when we renew our license that we have taken specific cultural competency courses, but diversity courses, right?
Yes.
That's one.
Yes.
But you keep saying something. You said overlook, we as a Black people. So now let's just, because sometimes we hear multicultural, we hear diversity, we hear DEI, but let's specifically talk about us as Black people. So you wrote a book. You wrote a book, Overlooked.
I did.
Counselor Insights for the Unspoken Issues in Black American Life. So now why do we have to have specific training and understanding and knowledge specifically for us as Black people?
Because only Black people are Black people.
Yes.
And there has been historically a major invalidation and dismissal of our story, of the effects of being separated from one's homeland, of the effects of slavery and Reconstruction, a failed Reconstruction, and Jim Crow and the Civil Rights era. And even today, do you know, Dr. T, I had someone say to me, well, LaVerne, you're educated and you have a wonderful life. I mean, certainly you haven't faced any racism. You wouldn't have gotten where you were.
Today, you have had somebody tell you that today.
I have heard that just in the last couple of years. There's a huge, what's the word? Gap.
Yes.
There's just a huge gap
Yes.
in our understanding of how our history influences us, how our trauma historically gets passed down, and so much of what is pathologized, and when I say pathologized, I mean treated as if it's dysfunctional and bad and evil or maladaptive or mental illness or undesirable or bad behavior, and it gets labeled. So much of all of those labels that get placed on Black children, Black women, Black men are only a result of systems that have not served us well.
Absolutely.
Half that labeling, I talk about clinical bias in the book.
Yes.
We find African American children disproportionately diagnosed with learning disabilities and placed in special education. We find Black men disproportionately diagnosed with schizophrenia. And there's a bias there because, without getting into a big technical conversation, many clinicians, counselors, overlook the depression in Black men and identify it improperly as something more severe, like schizophrenia. And one of the reasons for that is because the type of questions that we're taught to ask, the list that we have gotten, we get those lists of questions and screeners. They don't ask the questions in the way Black men would respond or would define something like depression. So we're missing depression historically all over the place. with black men. With black women, one example is the underdiagnosis of eating disorders. And with black children, they are held responsible and culpable for behavior that should only be punished maybe 3-4 years down the road. So we're treating a 9-year-old as if they have the social awareness and the ability to make good judgments, or the judgments of a 12-year-old.
Yes.
So we have all these biases. And if we're not intentionally looking at how the system has not served African Americans well, and if we don't intentionally bring about a shift in the diagnoses, in the historical factors, in the identity issues, in the losses. African Americans die at younger ages. So that means we lose people at younger ages, and that affects family systems. And so then the family system gets judged, and they're coming after you when you're doing the best you can, and you're doing what you need to do, but you're judged for it. I could go on and on. There's so many ways in which our culture, our stories, our challenges, even our strengths are misunderstood, and it can be used against us. And it's just time. It's time for those things that have been overlooked, those things that have been invalidated and questioned, and all the ways in which we're told, just get over it.
Right. Yeah. It's time.
Time.
And you know, as I listen to you say that, it's time, because I'm a believer that all the things you're talking about, what happens on the outside of the doors of the church, do not stop at the doors when the people come in.
Right.
That's why it's time for us to have these conversations
Right.
within the churches, because people are coming here to the church.
Yes.
Bio, psycho, social, spiritual. So
Yes.
we need to address all of those. So how could this book be beneficial to clergy and ministers in the church?
Well, you gotta know the needs of the people, the plight of the people coming through your doors. I love how you said that. What goes on outside the doors of the church also comes inside the doors of the church. And in order for clergy to understand these things that we're talking about, you got to have some resources. And it's especially important in the Black church, because the clergy, the pastor, the ministers are the men and women who people are most trusting of, and that's where they will go first. First level intervention are the spiritual leaders.
Yes. You know, if I can share, because here's the book, everyone, but if I could share, I put on the back of the book, I thank you for having me write a little blurb, and I said, a must-read book for counselors, therapists, and other helping professionals who work with Black and African American clients in a variety of settings. Overlooked uses excellent workmanship to shine a light on often overlooked and critical issues that help illuminate life in Black America. Through Dr. Collins, we have been given a phenomenal gift designed to enhance our multicultural and social justice counseling practices. I say this is for clergy and for the church as well, because we are providing pastoral care and counseling. So we, even as pastoral care providers, pastoral counselors, we do need to come from a multicultural and social justice perspective. And so again, that's about the intersection of bridging the gap between faith and mental health.
And if I can add this, pastors can trust that a Christian has written this book, and that the Christian perspective is not dismissed. One of the overlooked strengths is the spirituality and the historically Black church, the AME Zion Church, the AME Church, the Baptist churches, the Churches of God in Christ, all those churches. I shouldn't try to list them, but all of those historically Black churches, those form a foundation of our strength that others might overlook. I can't overlook that. I can't overlook that, because I know that my ancestors, I go back to my greats.
Yes.
I was able to research back to 1792.
Wow.
Not too far from where I live, and find the name of ancestors.
Wow.
And I know that the way I was taught from my mother and my grandmother,
Yes.
faith in Jesus Christ, faith in God, I know that goes way back.
Yes.
My grandmother didn't just
Yes, that's right. That's right.
she didn't just come to that realization.
Right.
Yeah, she was taught that
Yes.
because that's in my lineage.
That's right.
That's in my lineage, and that faith, that knowledge, that God
Yes.
is,
Yes.
and that God will,
Yes.
is what has gotten us through,
Yeah.
and we can't dismiss that. And we don't need to be afraid to allow someone to talk about their faith, or their challenges with their faith, or their challenges with the church. We don't need for them to be afraid to talk about that in counseling.
That's right.
And others might not understand that, might be afraid of that. But the work that I'm doing, the work that you're doing, I'm so thankful for it, because we are pouring into counselors of all races,
Yes.
Black, white, Hispanic,
Yes.
Jewish,
Yes.
and Latinx, and we are giving them what they need
Yes.
to understand the communities of color whom they serve.
Yeah, I agree. And one of my favorite chapters in the book, the whole book is great, but one of my favorite chapters that we have to talk about, I know some people that are watching are interested in disenfranchised grief and loss, the hidden sorrow of racism, but then also there's the chapter, This Far by Faith, Religion and Spirituality in Black Life. And so again, this really shows the importance of the intersection of theological, biblical foundations and psychological foundations. So how do we train leaders in the church to make sure they understand the connection and the intersection? So what suggestions, because we teach in counseling programs, but what might we need to do when it comes to clergy?
When I was in Richmond, Virginia, I worked for the Behavioral Health Authority, and we recognized that the community was going to their pastors. We began to host community meetings between the staff at the Behavioral Health Authority, and that, for those that don't know, the Behavioral Health Authority is the hub for intakes and placements into various levels of care for mental health and substance use disorders. So we are the hub for the community, but we recognize that the churches were the hub for their communities, their local communities. And we would take juice and coffee and donuts, and we would hear them tell us what the community was dealing with. That crack cocaine is coming into this community, and I'm going back a ways now. But you think about when crack cocaine first hit communities, and when you think about the gang wars and the gang violence, when that was coming into communities, they could almost tell us what drugs we should be prepared to expect coming through the treatment doors. But they didn't understand, and they shouldn't have been expected to understand without some communication, the process of intake and how slots are available, beds are available, what it means to get an intake, why we ask the questions we ask, what it means to be in an outpatient where you go in once a week or once every 2 weeks and talk to a person for an hour and leave, and how that's different from when you need to go into a place for 30 days and stay. So we educated them on the treatment systems, and they educated us on the community needs. And it was a wonderful, wonderful merging, blending, collegial relationships were developed. I was asked to preach at somebody's church to celebrate Recovery Day, and it was just wonderful. We need more of that. We need more opportunities where pastors are sitting at the table with counselors, and counselors sitting at the table with pastors, socially, sharing, exchanging. Identifying resources, recognizing problems and recognizing solutions.
Yeah. See, this is why we are so connected, because we we're like-minded. So I want to say to our listening audience, we are doing this right now in Chester County, Pennsylvania. So for any of you pastors and ministers in Chester County at any of the AME Zion churches, next Wednesday we're having a breakfast. Community Care Behavior Health and other agencies in the community. We are meeting clergy and ministers where they are. We're having a faith leaders breakfast. It's called Hope and Healing. And we're not going in to tell them what we do. We're going to find out what the leaders need. From us to be able to understand what's happening in the churches. But then also for you clinicians out there, your therapists, helping professionals, I'm a true believer. Meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. So go out in the community, engage in cross-cultural dialogues, immerse yourself in the communities so that we can bridge those gaps and have those communications and those dialogues. I love it. I love it.
I love that. I love that you're doing that too. Awesome.
Yeah, but see, I think what we're talking about, here it is, I'm in Pennsylvania. You're in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and you're doing these things. And if we can get more people to do this across the country, think about the number of lives that we would save.
Exactly. And the people that would find hope where they feel that there is no hope. We have to. We have to. Hope is not just found in our Sunday morning services. Hope can also be found in the counseling room, in the counseling sessions. When you open up and you share and you have a counselor who understands your struggle, who understands your pain, your loss, and doesn't make light of it, doesn't tell you, oh, are you sure that's really what happened? Yeah, I'm sure that's what happened. I faced discrimination in my workplace. I'm sure that's what happened.
That's right. That's right.
That's just real. And we have to be able to talk about that in a way that helps people to manage those situations, that helps them to know that they are not imagining, I won't say making it up, they know they aren't making it up, but you don't want someone telling you you're imagining racism.
Right. That's right.
No,
That's right.
no.
You know, as I'm listening to you tonight, language matters.
Absolutely.
We're talking about language, even language in the church. You know, we have to be careful using words such as bipolar, schizophrenic, right? Let's talk about how can we help pastors and clergy to understand that it's important to be aware of the language that they may use in Bible study and their sermonic presentations.
Right, right. You know, that I'm passionate about that because I've heard people say, well, you know, she's bipolar. No, she's Mary. She's Michelle. He's Bill. He's Robert. Bipolar disorder is not their identity.
That's right.
That is not, we don't label people. And most people don't know this. A diagnosis is nothing more than a set of symptoms that typically occur together. So rather than whenever you hear when you hear the person say, I'm experiencing this, 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 and this, you don't have to keep going this, 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 and this every time you speak of the problems that they're facing. You put it in a bucket, and that bucket has a name. It's just that's all it is. It is not an indictment, and this is where when I talk about destigmatizing, removing the stigma, taking away the shame. You know, my doctor treats me for high cholesterol. I am not high cholesterol.
That's right.
I am not high cholesterol. If you're treated for heart disease, you don't say, oh, I'm heart disease. I'm high blood pressure. You know, she's liver disease. We don't do that. The brain is an organ. The brain is an organ. And people follow the advice of their pastors and their leaders.
Yes.
And when pastors and leaders set the bar and set the standard, when pastors and leaders talk about, we don't discriminate against this group, that race, that message has to also apply to people who have diverse challenges in mental health.
That's right.
We don't discriminate against but disabilities.
Yes.
We're not going to discriminate. We're not going to speak disparagingly. We're not going to speak judgmentally. We're gonna treat everybody the same, because in the eyes of God, everybody is equal.
Right.
Everybody is the same.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we can do is begin to address mental wellness,
Yes.
just as we address physical wellness.
That's right. That's
When you have your health fairs,
Yep.
you include mental wellness
That's right.
in there, and you talk about stress management,
Yes.
and you talk about anxiety, and you talk about depression, you talk about treatment resources
Yes.
in the same way, and you can even do screenings.
Yes.
You can have a mental health professional there to do depression screenings or anxiety screenings,
That's right.
just like you do hypertension screenings.
Yes, yes, yeah. And you know, I think that's really important, because people are not their diagnosis. So we
Right.
got to be aware of our language.
Right.
People may have, you talked about some of the trauma that we might experience, the trauma of racism and oppression, the historical trauma. And I come from this stance of trauma informed. It's not what's wrong with the person,
What's happened to them?
to behave this way, right?
What happened to them? Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right. And so we have to help people to understand that sometimes these are normal reactions to this extraordinary event.
Exactly, exactly. And that is one of the aspects of working with Black and African American people that's overlooked. You know, if you can imagine a tree, I use a tree as a symbol.
Okay.
And on a tree, you see the leaves and if there's fruit or flowers at the top.
Right.
And that's what we tend to focus on in mental health. We focus on what you see.
Yeah.
You focus on, oh, you see someone sad, you see someone crying or sleeping more than normal or whatever, or you see them worried and anxious. You know, we tend to focus on that, or we see that they maybe are self-medicating with gambling, overspending, substance use disorder, those kinds of things. That's where we have historically put all of our attention.
Yes.
But the trunk of that tree is what feeds
Oh, yeah.
the leaves, what produces the fruit. What's the trunk in our mental health life?
Right.
The trunk are our core bodily systems,
Right.
core functions like our minds, our psychological stress, and stress on different systems, our endocrine system, our nervous system. Well, that's the trunk. But why do the systems come under such stress? Why do these core functions go awry?
Yeah.
Well, the trunk is not sitting on the ground.
Right.
The trunk is supported and planted with what you don't see.
That's right.
You don't see those roots
Right.
that go deep.
Right.
And in our lives, in our mental health experience, the roots are where the trauma is hidden.
Yes.
That's where, if you've been raped or assaulted,
Right.
if that rape or assault is buried, but that root, the root of that is feeding
Yes.
the stress in your core functions, which leads to the need to go for something to self-medicate. You
Yes.
overeat, or you do something, or you're anxious, or you're depressed, or you're worried, or you're stressed. That's the stuff that we see at the top, the leaves so when you speak about racial trauma,
Right.
discrimination, not to mention the heavy COVID impact
Yes.
in our communities.
Yes.
When you think about being assumed guilty,
Yes.
it's like we are well, I like to say, others are innocent until proven guilty, but when you're Black or African American, you're guilty until proven innocent. So that judgment, being stalked in a store, profiled, police assaults, and just all the things that every day cause you to remember that you're part of a world that looks at you differently. You're part of a world that just may not give you the same level of respect. Lost opportunities, early deaths, all those things are traumatic, and they're all underneath the surface of life. We got to nurture. I'm going to say we have to heal the root so the tree can be stable.
Yeah, and you know, I know we're coming to an end, but now this is where I want to bring this up, because you're talking about all these things. No wonder sometimes people are angry. And then they might take it out on God. And I'm angry at God. I'm angry at people around me. You wrote an article about working with clients who are angry with God. Tell us a little bit more about that.
It's a whole workshop.
Yes.
It's a whole workshop. When our experience, that is what actually happens, doesn't match our expectation, we're going, what just happened here?
Right.
I thought God was going to heal or deliver. I thought God was going to solve this, fix this, correct my marriage. I thought God would honor my prayer of faith. And here I am sitting at a funeral. Here I am burying a child. Here I am in divorce court. Here I am in bankruptcy court, because God didn't do what I thought God was going to do.
Right.
Well, no, that's not why you're sitting there.
Yeah.
We're sitting there because we're in a broken, fallen world. We don't have a fallen God. We have a fallen world.
Yes. Yes.
We have a fallen world, and God said in Genesis chapter 3, with the fall of humanity, that everything was going to be topsy-turvy, upside down. Yeah. And it really is. So what I help people do, and what I help counselors guide people to, is to make to come to the place where they can navigate. They can navigate the experience, even when it was not what they expected. And one of the things I say is, if we can help people to believe in God's love without making his love conditional upon the outcome of our problems, we will have done well. And we've got to get to the place where our testimony at the beginning of a trial, at the middle of a trial, at the end of a trial or tribulation is the same. And for me, I'll just tell you, for me, I love Romans chapter 8.
Yes.
I love Romans chapter 8. And we said we wouldn't preach tonight.
Yes, that's right.
But God loves me with an everlasting love, and nothing can separate me from the love of God that's in Christ Jesus.
That's right.
That's my testimony at the beginning of my trial or my tribulation. That's my testimony in the middle of the situation. That's still my testimony at the end, that nothing can separate me from the love of God that's in Christ Jesus. And, you know, the scripture tells us, hey, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, sword, right? It's going to happen.
That's right.
It's going to happen. But all that may come, all that may go, but nothing's going to separate me from the love of God that's in Christ Jesus.
That's right.
So we don't have a fallen God.
No.
We're in a fallen world.
Yes. That's good. That's good. I love it. I love it. So, you know, we're coming to an end. So a couple things. One, how can people get your book or get in contact with you regarding any of your trainings?
Sure. The book is available on Amazon, Amazon.com. The full title is Overlooked: Counselor Insights for the Unspoken Issues in Black American Life. And as you already said, we're talking about overlooked historical factors, overlooked identity issues, overlooked clinical bias, overlooked losses, and overlooked strengths. And I do workshops, as you mentioned, for counselors and other providers and pastors. I have pastors that come. I love when the pastors come to my workshops. My website is newseasons.training. very, very simple, and you go to workshops and continuing education, and there you find the links to any workshops that are on the schedule.
Absolutely. And if you're watching on any of our social media sites, I'll put that link in the chat box as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, any last words for our listening audience before we come to a close?
I just want to say to you how much I appreciate your voice in our profession, how much I appreciate your voice in the household of faith, how I appreciate your voice in the community. And I thank you for all that you do, for the communities. It's a tremendous work. I know it's weighty, but my goodness, it's blessed. And you are a blessing.
Thank you
so
so
much.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you for just having this live event with me. My sister, my friend, my colleague, Dr. LaVerne Hanes Collins. Thank you for joining us tonight for Talking with Dr. T. Please join us next month where we will have Dr. Wayne Croft, who is the pastor of St. Paul's Baptist Church in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And join us in December as we will have Dr. Jerry Carter from Calvary Baptist Church in Morristown, New Jersey. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a wonderful and blessed evening. And thank you for those who are watching the recording after the fact. Please drop notes in the comments. I will be going back to look at them, and hopefully we will see you again soon. God bless.